Have you ever wondered what the absolute weirdest way to die would be? Well, buckle up, because today we're covering some of the most ridiculous, bizarre, and downright unbelievable deaths in human history. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at everyday objects the same way again. I'm talking about deaths so strange that if you saw them in a movie, you'd think the writers were just making stuff up. We've got people killed by their own beards, crushed by falling signs, and one guy who literally laughed himself to death at his own joke. I've spent hours researching the most documented cases of bizarre deaths throughout history, and I'm going to share the top stories that will make you question everything. Let's start with Hans Steininger, and this guy had the most magnificent beard you've ever seen. We're talking over 4.5 feet of pure facial hair glory. Hans lived in the 16th century and was actually the mayor of a town called Braunau am Inn for 6 consecutive terms. Why? Because look at that beard. Who wouldn't vote for majestic beard guy over some clean-shaven nobody? Hans was legitimately a good mayor too. He cared about his people and did right by his town, but that glorious beard would be his downfall, literally. On September 28, 1567, a fire broke out in the town. Now back then, fires were way more dangerous than today because their firefighting tactics were basically just throwing buckets of water and hoping for the best. So when a fire started, everyone had to act fast. Hans usually kept his beloved beard tucked safely in a leather pouch when he traveled. But in the panic of the fire, he let his luscious locks flow free as he ran to help. Big mistake. As he was rushing down some stairs, Hans accidentally stepped on his own facial hair. He tripped, tumbled down the entire staircase, snapped his neck, and died instantly. The town was devastated, not by the fire, but by losing their beloved bearded mayor. Before burying him, they carefully removed Hans's beard and preserved it. You can still see it in a museum today. Imagine his ghost watching tourists gawk at the thing that killed him. Now here's a story that sounds made up but is completely real. Meet Chrysippus, a Greek philosopher from the 3rd century BC. This guy was brilliant. He created systems of logic that we still use today and was a major figure in Stoic philosophy. But Chrysippus had one weakness. He found everything hilarious when he was drunk. At the age of 73, Chrysippus got absolutely wasted at a feast. While stumbling around in his drunken state, he spotted a donkey munching on some figs. For some reason, this struck him as the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He shouted, "Give the donkey some wine to wash down those figs." This joke, which honestly isn't even that funny, sent Chrysippus into such an intense fit of laughter that he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. He literally laughed himself to death. Now, you might think, can you actually die from laughing? The answer is yes. If you laugh hard enough for long enough, it puts serious stress on your heart. You can also lose consciousness from laughing yourself out of breath. But you'd have to find something exceptionally funny for that to happen. So don't worry, you're safe watching this video. This next story is peak irony. Clement Vallandigham was an American lawyer and politician in the 1800s. After his political career tanked, he turned to law and took on a murder case. His client, Thomas McGahan, was accused of shooting and killing a man named Tommy Myers. Clement claimed that Myers hadn't been murdered at all. He'd accidentally shot himself while getting up from a seated position. Clement was so confident in this theory that he decided to demonstrate it in court. "Watch this," he basically said. "I'll show you exactly how Myers accidentally killed himself." Here's where things went horribly wrong. When you're demonstrating how someone accidentally shot themselves, you want to make absolutely sure you're using an unloaded gun. Clement didn't do that. He grabbed what he thought was an unloaded pistol, stood up to recreate the scene, and proceeded to shoot himself in the exact same way he claimed Myers had died. Clement died 12 hours later from his injuries. The verdict? Not guilty. His client was acquitted because Clement had literally proven that the death could have been accidental. McGeehan walked free, though he was murdered a few years later anyway. Talk about taking your job seriously. Bobby Leach was the definition of a daredevil. Born in England in 1858, he eventually made his way to America and joined the Barnum and Bailey Circus as a professional high diver. After retiring from circus life at 50, Bobby settled near Niagara Falls and opened a restaurant. But the daredevil life called to him again. Between 1906 and 1911, he performed increasingly dangerous stunts around the falls. His biggest challenge? The falls themselves. On July 25, 1911, Bobby climbed into a custom metal barrel and went over Niagara Falls. He survived. Sure, he gashed his forehead, broke his jaw, and shattered his kneecaps, but he was alive. Bobby became only the second person to survive going over the falls. For the next 15 years, Bobby lived as a celebrity, planning even more dangerous stunts. Death couldn't touch this guy, right? Wrong. In 1926, Bobby was walking down a street when he slipped on an orange peel. He broke his leg, which got infected with gangrene, and died a few days later. This man survived going over one of the world's most dangerous waterfalls in a metal barrel, only to be taken out by citrus fruit. Death really does have a sense of humor. Here's an ancient Greek story that sounds like something out of a cartoon. Aeschylus was one of the greatest playwrights in history. He's literally called the father of tragedy. He wrote around 500 plays, though only a few survive today. As a young man, Aeschylus heard a prophecy that he would die from something falling from above. So he did the logical thing. He avoided buildings and spent most of his time outdoors. If nothing's above you, nothing can fall on you, right? This worked for decades. Aeschylus lived a long, successful life, creating masterpieces of theater. But fate had other plans. One day, while walking through the countryside, an eagle flying overhead spotted Aeschylus's bald head. The eagle was carrying a tortoise and needed to crack its shell on a rock. Mistaking the playwright's shiny dome for a stone, the eagle dropped the tortoise directly onto Aeschylus's head. The impact killed him instantly, so the prophecy came true in the most ridiculous way possible. Aeschylus spent his whole life avoiding falling objects, only to be taken out by aerial turtle delivery. Story 6. Gary Hoy, the Unbreakable Window. This story happened in 1993, making it one of our more recent entries. Gary Hoy was a successful lawyer at a Toronto law firm, working on the 24th floor of a skyscraper. Gary had a party trick that he loved showing off to visitors. He would run full speed at the office windows to demonstrate how strong and safe Canadian architecture was. "These windows are unbreakable," he'd say, bouncing off the glass to impressed gasps. Gary had done this trick dozens of times without incident. The windows really were incredibly strong. On July 9, 1993, Gary was giving a tour to some law students. When they reached the 24th floor, he decided to show off his signature move. "Watch this," Gary said, charging at the window at full speed. He hit the glass and bounced off perfectly, just like always. The students applauded. "Want to see me do it again?" Gary asked. This time, something went wrong. Gary hit the window with the same force as before, and the glass held firm. But the entire window frame popped out of its setting. Gary, still pressed against the unbroken glass, plummeted 24 stories to his death, riding the window panel all the way down. The students and colleagues who witnessed this were traumatized. Many of the firm's lawyers needed counseling, and some left the company entirely. The firm closed in 1996. Gary was right about one thing. The glass really was unbreakable. It was the frame that failed. Horse racing has always been dangerous, but this story takes it to another level. Frank Hayes was a 22-year-old stable boy in Ireland who dreamed of becoming a jockey. In 1923, Frank got his chance to race. But there was one problem. He was too heavy. Jockeys needed to weigh less than 130 pounds, and Frank was 12 pounds over the limit. Frank was determined to make weight, so he went on an extreme crash diet. Through what were probably very unhealthy methods, he managed to lose the weight in just a few days. On June 4th, 1923, Frank mounted his horse, Sweet Kiss, for the race. Nobody expected them to win. They had 20-to-1 odds against them. The race began, and Sweet Kiss quickly fell behind the pack. But in the final stretch, something amazing happened. The horse found another gear and started closing the gap. Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line first, winning by a respectable margin. The crowd cheered as Frank appeared to hug his horse's neck in celebration. But when Sweet Kiss slowed to a walk, Frank was still hugging the horse's neck. He wasn't celebrating, he was dead. Frank's heart had given out during the race, probably from the extreme weight loss. Sweet Kiss had carried a corpse across the finish line to victory. The horse was nicknamed Sweet Kiss of Death after that, and no jockey would ever ride her again. She never raced again. Let's go way back to the year 1016 for this medieval nightmare. King Edmund Ironside of England was doing what kings do, ruling England and fighting off Viking invasions. But Edmund had enemies closer to home. According to legend, one particularly creative assassin decided to take out the king in the most undignified way possible. The assassin hid in the royal privy, basically a medieval toilet, and waited. When King Edmund sat down to do his business, the assassin struck from below with a spear. Edmund was literally killed while on the toilet, stabbed from underneath. Talk about being caught with your pants down. This has to be one of the most humiliating ways for a king to die. Imagine being remembered in history books as the monarch who got murdered on the toilet. This tragic story happened in 2023 in Kentucky. A 72-year-old woman named Lillian Curtis was in the car with her daughter and husband, who had just been released from the hospital after heart surgery. They decided to stop for lunch at a Denny's restaurant. It was a windy day. We're talking 40 to 60 miles per hour gale force winds, but they figured they'd be safe inside their car. They parked directly under the Denny's sign and started eating their meals. The wind was shaking everything, but the family felt secure in their vehicle. Then, disaster struck. The massive 2,600-pound Denny's sign, battered by the wind, broke free from its supports and came crashing down directly onto their car. The sign hit the rear of the vehicle exactly where Lillian was sitting. Her daughter and husband survived with injuries, but Lillian was killed instantly by the crushing weight of the sign. 4 days later, her husband also died from injuries sustained in the accident, ending their 50-year marriage in the most tragic way imaginable. This was completely preventable. If the sign had been properly maintained and secured, 2 lives wouldn't have been lost. The investigation is still ongoing, but this family deserved so much better. Story 10, the Stegosaurus Statue Mystery. Our final story happened in 2021 in Barcelona, Spain. A father and son were walking through a shopping complex when they spotted a large papier-mâché Stegosaurus statue left over from a movie promotion. They wanted to take a photo with the cool dinosaur, but as they got closer, they were hit by an overwhelming smell of decay and rot. Following their noses, they discovered the smell was coming from one of the statue's legs. Peering through a crack, they could see what looked like a human body inside. Emergency services were called, and they extracted the corpse of a 39-year-old man who had been reported missing. Under his body, they found a mobile phone just out of reach. Here's what investigators think happened. The man somehow dropped his phone inside the statue and crawled in head first to retrieve it. Once inside the leg of the dinosaur, he got stuck upside down and couldn't turn around or reach his phone. He was trapped there for at least 2 days, unable to call for help because his phone was just inches away but unreachable. He eventually suffocated in the confined space. The cruel irony. If he could have reached that phone, he could have called for help and survived. Sometimes it's the smallest things that make the difference between life and death. So there you have it. 10 of the most unbelievable ways people have actually died throughout history. From ancient philosophers laughing themselves to death to modern lawyers demonstrating their way into tea.